Yes, it's been excellent, and football-wise, it's been good. Did okay in game week 9. We'll come to that in a minute. But Brighton, hey, 3-3 against Liverpool, and almost beat them. Almost. Very excited.
Pretty quickly.
Boom. Right, should be sorted now. I apologise.
Right.
I'm going to start again. Hello and welcome to Scoutcast, brought to you by Fantasy Football Scout. Joe, we are joined by you, and we're also joined by somebody else who will get to talk in a second. Joe, how was your week?
Apparently, everyone could hear me, and you were muted. So I'll just repeat myself again and pretend that I was muted as well. I've had a great week. It's been brilliant. Brighton almost beat Liverpool. Whoa, hey. And and also we have a new co-host as well. So enough about me.
We do indeed. So Seb is obviously not here until after Christmas now, after the World Cup. So we looked around and we tried to find the best person we could possibly have on the pod. He wasn't available, so we got Rich, Flapjack FPL. How's it going, Rich?
Yeah, really good, really good. I've been looking forward to this all week. I've been wanting to tell people. Last night, FPL wise, kind of put me off coming on a little bit, but I'm still here.
Good man. We're thrilled to have you, honestly. Obviously, I was joking before. We're thrilled to have you, and you're going to be on here for a couple of weeks for us, aren't you? At least.
I am. Maybe some people guessed it because you called me a Muppet last week, which I did hear while I was doing the washing up.
Obviously, that is talking about your Twitter logo and everything, isn't it? I would never call you a Muppet.
You would.
Might do. Right, Joe, what's coming up on the show tonight then?
Rightio. Oh, just before I do that, I just wanted to mention Rich's track record in FPL, because it's a good way to introduce those that maybe aren't familiar with him. And so he's had 4 top 10k finishes. So he brings up the tally of top 10k finishes to 11, and he's but 3 of those have been in the last 5 seasons. So none of that accusations, oh, it was so easy when only 10 people played. He's been doing it when millions have been doing it. So well done there. But yeah, what else is coming up on the show, apart from bigging up Rich's FPL career? We'll look back at that Haaland-themed game week 9. We'll take a look back on Chelsea and Brighton under new management. So it's just a bit of a recap on what we talked about last week, just to see if any of those things that we said came true and how they did. And they did really well. So planning for the next 4, that's the main theme. So Rich is going to be looking at captaincy picks, but captainable players, because Haaland's going to be the main captain. But so premium picks, those that we might want to captain, and those just we want to get in as well for the next 4. So yeah, we understand that Haaland's going to be the top choice for the captaincy there. So planning for the next 4 continues with Andy. He's going to be looking at those team stats to see the latest attacks, the best attacks, and the defenses to target for the final weeks just before the World Cup. So next 4, and then we've hopefully set us up for those last few weeks before the World Cup starts. Plus, look back at the community team, teacher Andy's Q&A, and also we'll reveal our teams and plans and captaincy for game week 10. It's Haaland, by the way, for the captaincy, so I can just reveal that now.
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing controversial here tonight. It's worth saying as well, we're obviously really happy to have 4 top 10k finishes for Rich, 7 for Joe, and that makes 11 for the whole show, which is exactly what we want, isn't it? So shall we have a look at our points from this week? I might stay on this screen for the rest of the night, to be honest. So I finished on 106 this week. I've moved from 350k to 65k, which I'm quite happy with. I had Pope in goal for 2 points, Zuma for 6 points, Cancelo for 1 point, Trippier for 7, Bowen for 14, Martinelli for 4, Ward-Prowse for 2, Maddison for 18, Haaland for 46 as captain, Kane with 6, I think it's 6 or 8, I can't remember, we'll see it from here now, Mitrovic with 0, and yeah, I was really happy. I was really happy with my decision making this week as well. I decided to roll instead of bringing James in. So I was going to bring James in for Perisic and bench Zuma or Trippier. And I decided just to roll to have 2 free transfers next week. And because I still wasn't convinced that James was going to keep a clean sheet, it was just the fact he's got obviously that attacking threat. And I thought, do I go for it? But I decided not to in the end. And I rolled, and it turned out to be a good decision. So yeah, thrilled to bits, to be perfectly honest. The only duds in there were Cancelo, Pope, Ward-Prowse and Mitrovic. Yeah, there wasn't much more I could have done here. I think 106 points, 65k. I will take that every week. Joe, moving on to your points. 91 points for you this week.
Ordinarily, I'd have gone I'd have been the on top there, but yeah, 106. There's a long way to go to be that. So yeah, very happy with that, obviously. So before wildcarded, I was just outside, well, just on the edge of the top million, and gone up to 299. So just in the top 300k. So very pleased with that. Trippier got his points before he subbed off. Lots of blanks though. Pope, Cancelo, James, Zaha. Mitrovic went off injured. Tony only 1 point, so lots of players blank. But it was really Haaland with his captaincy. Madison 18 points. De Bruyne, who I was considering swapping to Salah, but no way now. Yeah. So he did well. Martinelli, cheeky few points there. But Ward on my bench, I'm not going to regret that. I mean, he would have guessed he'd actually get some points, but maybe he might earn a start at some point.
No, I like it. And I was just thinking, but how long ago was it that you were 1 million in overall rank and now you're up to 300k? That could have only been a couple of weeks.
It was. It's about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I was 900 and something or other 2 weeks ago, and then I wildcarded. So this may be the first time in a number of years where the first wildcard has actually been a success but it's only been 2 weeks. So when I get back down to 1 million, there's not many places between us. So all I need is one more game week of being okay, and I will declare this a success, maybe.
Nice. And Rich, I'm so sorry to get you on when you're like, you've obviously had not the worst week, but not as good a week, but 80 points for you this week. Talk us through your team for everybody listening on the pod.
Yeah, I feel I've got mixed emotions with this because obviously I've had a small red arrow, and I mean, seeing scores like both of your scores are incredible. There's a lot of people, with over. I've seen people with like 120 points, things like that. But it could have been a lot worse. I did KDB to Salah, and I was very close to captaining Salah. One of the main reasons I didn't was because I was a bit scared. My team I didn't feel like it looked that great to start with. I genuinely considered Saka to Maddison. I didn't do it because I think I do want Zaha more. I actually want Saka more. So, I didn't expect that to happen last night. So that kind of tainted it. And the one decision I had to make, I got lucky I didn't get lucky on the captaincy, but I could have got very unlucky if I'd gone for Salah, like many did. I decided to start Botman over Bailey and Andreas, and I almost got that triple clean sheet. I mean, Botman was on 11 points, and it was just all the defenders seem to get subbed off apart from Botman. And then the clean sheet goes because the team's been changed. So it could have actually been a pretty good week.
You take 80 any other week, wouldn't you? It's just how it happened, really. And you had Haaland captain as well.
Well, yeah, it was like when Joe sent a message, didn't he, to us yesterday saying we're all on green arrows, and I thought I was until I checked, and
I think he knew. I think secretly he knew. We've got green arrow on the stream anyway.
Yeah, so good job. Az took over the presenter screen to eradicate any mistakes there.
Lovely stuff. I mean, obviously the KDB to Salah, that's with longer term view in there, isn't it? You want Salah for the blank, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, I'd undo it if I could now, because obviously the reason I would have kept KDB is not only to have 2 free transfers, but he's got the better fixture this week. Despite recent results with City, Southampton, I'd love to have KDB, especially as Haaland's going to be so heavily captained. But I also just couldn't turn down having Mo Salah in my team against Brighton, and they did score 3 goals. So yeah, long term, maybe I'm happy with Salah. Although I'm sure most people with KDB are much more happy with KDB.
Yeah, but again, they're going to have some problems moving forward, I think, because we've got those City players in our team, so we need to get rid of them for the blank. Joe, we're going to move on to your first section. We're going to have, because last week we did a brilliant section with you and Seb about Brighton and Chelsea and how they're changing and things. And obviously this week we had quite some dramatic scenes with both teams. So I've got Brighton up first, and you're just going to talk us through their stats.
Yeah, this is just a sort of short recap, really, of that to see if we learn anything, see what some of the things we thought would happen will come true. So the stats you've got up on the screen, that's right, the Gameweek 9, Brighton against Liverpool. That shows obviously what we knew, that Trossard was the main man there. Just 4 shots on target, which is pretty good, and 3 of those went in. Expected goal involvement of over 1, which is great. Meanwhile, Welbeck, the assister guy, so he got one assist, created a couple of chances, a couple of shots on target. This bodes well for Welbeck. Solly March as well, the wing back that is further forward than the supposed winger, or number 10 in this case, but we'll come to that in a minute. Estupinan, I put him in there because he created a chance, but he was a bit further back than Solly March on the other side. And Mitoma came on 4.9 and very impressive. So his expected goal involvement was very, very low there, but he did earn an assist and hugely impressive. I mean, it's always, maybe not these days, but if you basically can floor Alexander-Arnold, glide past him and set up a goal at Anfield, that tends to impress people, and that certainly impressed me. But what we saying last week was we were looking at Brighton were adopting a sort of 3-5-2 sort of formation, but the wing backs were more like wingers. So Trossard was very much advanced. There was a little bit of a difference this time around. So what he was looking at was a 3-4-2-1. And Trossard was much more central. So this is why Trossard is certainly on my radar, not just because of the hat-trick, but just because of his position. So he was more of a 10, more central behind Welbeck. So him and Gross behind Welbeck, but it was Trossard who was the one that was really playing much closer to Welbeck. So with the Welbeck assist, Trossard goal, Trossard or Gross assist, Welbeck goal, that's something we might be seeing a lot under the new manager. Could be quite common over the weeks ahead. March, much more advanced than Gross. Estupinan, mostly more defensive. Mitoma, mentioned again. When he came on, he was tucked in right behind where Welbeck is. So very advanced on the wing. And Zerbi has indicated that he is very pleased with the squad he's inherited and will implement any changes slowly. So he's favoured a 4 at the back we spoke about last week. So it might be a little way before we go into that. So his favoured 4 at the back might not see that. We might actually stick with this formation. It certainly did well at the weekend, but it could change with different opponents. Just as an aside, he's already warmed the hearts of Brighton fans by immediately having a celebratory meal at Donatello's restaurant, which is the Italian restaurant that used to sponsor Brighton back when we were in the lower leagues. So that's a very Brighton thing to do, going for a meal at Donatello's. You live in Yeovil, so you might know of the Tamburino chain.
I do indeed.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Imagine the thrills of that. Do you want to move on to Chelsea?
I do. Before I do, though, I just wanted to say, because 2 people that aren't on this list that obviously a lot of people were thinking about, as well as Trossard, Grosh and McAllister, are they no-goes now in terms of if you want a Brighton player, you just get Trossard, or...?
They're not no-goes. I mean, there's clearly a lot of goals, and they might concede more. But there's clearly a lot of goals in there. But Trossard is the main one to get. McAllister's on penalties still, as far as we know. But that's as he's always been. He's always played further back. He scores worldies. He scores penalties. But he's not going to do that every week. So he is what he is. But I wouldn't say they're no goes. But Trossard is the main one to get. And I do think Welbeck, and he may end up staying fit. And if he does, I think Welbeck or Trossard look really good. But just before we move on to Chelsea, I should have asked you both what you think really as well. But
I was just about to ask Rich, actually. So Rich, Trossard, obviously the fixtures aren't amazing up until the World Cup, but a lot of us are looking at those kind of mid-price midfielders, and it seems to be that's where the points are at the moment. So where would you rank Trossard in terms of Zaha, Bowen, Maddison are all kind of those 3 that a lot of people are wanting? Would you rate Trossard higher than any of those?
See, that I think that's the difficulty, how you've outlined it there. There's so many options now, because I'm even having difficulty with, I mean, there's players like Saka as well. And Foden. I feel like Trossard's a player I'd want down the line, but there's so many other options at the moment. I mean, Zaha seems the one I'm desperate to get him in with this upcoming fixture run until the World Cup. So my question actually is for Joe, because you mentioned that they might concede more. But there's obviously, you've got Patterson as well, for example. Would you go for like a Dunker or Webster? Because obviously Stepanan, he's probably not really now.
There's a big caveat there. I mean, they were at Anfield playing Liverpool. So I would have expected them to concede. I thought the nature of the goals as well, I thought they were a bit unlucky. There was an own goal there. They're not conceding a lot of goals so far. Under Zerbi, his teams, they were scoring a lot and conceding a lot, but they're very possession-based. I like the look of I've always liked Dunk and Webster, and I think they're definitely on my radar because I've got Patterson, and if he's not fit for Game Week 12, then I do need another player there, and I'm looking at Palace defenders and Brighton defenders, but luckily we get to see them a little bit, so hopefully that transfer I can make a bit further down the line.
That's the
But
thing.
yeah,
That feels like that's where I'd go more, just because of the structure and the other options we got. Like Trossard's a great option, but I just don't see me bringing him in. Whereas the defenders, I could see they'd have some utility at least.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think Dunk is quite underpriced, and what I would like to see is a bit more goal involvement from him. I mean, he always traditionally was getting goals, and
I mean, he got me a goal, but it was just in the wrong net when I brought him in.
I mean, he used to take some free kicks as well. So I like to see a bit more of that. My instinct says that Webster will do well, and I like to see him more, just because he's a bit more of a passing out from the back type of defender that could help keep possession. And as we talked about last week, Zerbi's all about possession.
Joe, before we just really quickly before we move on to the Chelsea, the Chelsea section is what I was going to say. You mentioned about them being a bit more attacking. Is this what we're expecting to see now all the time, or is it just that they thought Liverpool were there to be got at? Because it would be really interesting to see whether Brighton do adopt a more attacking style now.
Well, luckily we get to see. So for me, as we're going to talk about in your sections, Brighton are a team I'm looking at sort of from Game Week 12 onwards. I mean, I know they have a tricky fixture Game Week 13, but it's more Game Week 12 when I'll need them. And they play Forest then. And I mean, I'm thinking captaincy that week for the likes of Trossard. I know, get me. but because we haven't got Haaland.
Yeah.
And who was the better player on the day, Salah or Trossard?
I will pay you good money if you go Trossard. I will. But there's only one time I remember a lot of people captaining Trossard, and that was against Newcastle in a blank game week. Do you remember that? And he got a brace, didn't he?
For Nottingham Forest though, they're really. I don't know. They might have a new manager by then. Who knows? I mean, maybe not. But I mean, if they carry on shipping 4 goals each week, and this is meant to be their easy run of fixtures coming up, so.
Well, so there's Brighton for you, and we're moving on to Chelsea next.
Yes.
So, Joe, talk us through Chelsea, because obviously they had Potter as their manager for the first time in the Premier League. And what happened?
Rightio. Okay, well, I'll go through the stats we've got up on the screen, and just making sure those stats are there. Yeah, great. So Sterling is the main man to get, but he's costly. 10 million. Expected goal involvement of 0.5. He's no Trossard, but he's still doing well. Created 3 chances, 1 shot on target. These are the kind of stats you want to see. You want to see a lot of involvement there. Thiago Silva is actually second in this. Well, but looking at in the match against Palace, but nevertheless 5.4. I don't think we're going to go there in defence. But the other ones are interesting. Mount, a couple of chances created. Now James, a lot of people look at James and go, "Oh, back 4. I'm not so keen anymore." But he did create a couple of chances, and. Officially, it was a sort of a 4-2-2-2, according to the BBC. But I didn't really see that. And then I had a look on Fantasy Football Scout, and so had it something a little bit better to look at. It showed that it's sort of under Potter there. It was 4-2-2-2, but it turned into a sort of 2-4-2-2, which was quite good. So James was much higher up. So he was way above the halfway line on average for most of the game, essentially in a midfield 4 on the wing. So he's playing more like a wing back. So I wasn't too worried about that. So as a James owner, I feel I'm going to keep him. Chilwell was actually a bit further behind, so he was sort of on the halfway line on average. Sterling and Aubameyang were up front, so they were the 2 up front. But it was really Sterling was the most advanced, and Aubameyang was sort of more of a number 10. Occupying this very similar place to Mount. So the similar areas there, which makes me think that Mount could be an option there if he is one of those players sort of feeding Sterling. So one to monitor there. Brozier came on, very advanced, just behind Sterling, was more advanced than Havertz was. So that's a situation we monitor, because I would love Chelsea's main striker to be, however cheap he is, and to come on. But he didn't register for any expected goal involvement, so that also tells another story there. Gallagher did well, but he actually for the limited time he was on the pitch, he was more of a deeper midfield, more central in the midfield. So yeah, lots to back up what we were talking about last week, that Potter will change depending on opponents. But one thing that hasn't changed is that James, in a back four or back five, whatever, is still in getting threatened positions, and Sterling is still an option and still a cheeky differential. So can I woo anyone here with Chelsea assets? Rich, maybe?
Well, Rich, I was just going to ask you about that, because Sterling and James are the ones highlighted here, and they're the ones I think we need to talk about. Like, James, you've always been a massive James lover, haven't you? Like, you love James, and it was planned for me to do that move in for this week, and for some reason I'm hesitating. Do you think I should be?
I think your situation, you showed good willpower. I wouldn't have been able to avoid that, but I think because you had Zuma, at home against Wolves, I think that helped you do it. I made it a bit more of a sensible decision. I mean, I've got James, so I'm going to keep him.
Yeah.
What's interesting about that is Chilwell was someone pre-season I really wanted to get in, as did many people. And as Joe's highlighted, based off this one game, it doesn't look worth it. Obviously, especially when you take into account the fact he's not nailed yet. But I mean, James and Sterling, James, I'm happy to keep. Your situation is difficult, because if I didn't have him, I'd be thinking maybe I could use the transfer somewhere else. But I think I would, if I had an easy way to do it, I'd want James in my team. If, for example, I was on wildcard this week, I know people aren't, he'd be one of the first names I'd put on my team sheet. Sterling's just that awkward price, isn't he?
He really is. And we've already mentioned about all those other midfielders that are 2 million less than him, that are doing so well. But he's the one I'm looking at and thinking, if I had that kind of fifth midfield spot and I had the money, he's the one I think I'd take a flyer on.
The thing is, I think if I know we're going to be captaining Haaland a lot, that's an assumption I'm going to make. But if I was going to captain a Chelsea player for any reason, I'd captain James.
Really?
I would, even if I own Sterling. Yeah, no, I really would. So that kind of takes away from the appeal of Sterling for me as well. I mean, don't get me wrong, there might be a team structure out there where they've got Salah, for example, and they don't want him. Maybe they could go to Sterling. But again, there's all those 8 million mids that we've talked about. So I don't see a place for him. It's kind of like with Brighton, it's the structure. Yeah.
It seems so tough, doesn't it, to get him in? And if that's the case, are we happy just going with the one Chelsea with these fixtures coming up and with the blank coming up as well? Just Reece James being the one.
Fofana could be tempting. A bit like we were just discussing with Duncan Webster. Maybe Fofana. I mean, it's not an enticing or sexy pick, but for people looking for cheap defenders, he'd probably be my second choice.
Yeah, and Joe. We've already mentioned, you mentioned Brozier, but Aubameyang obviously scored a really good goal as well, didn't he? That volley was really good. But 0.11 in terms of XGI. He didn't have a lot of other chances. No. He looks like he's kind of, if you watch the game and only watch match of the day, you might think, oh, he's looking good again. But when you look at the stats, not really what we want to see quite yet.
His position is a bit further back, which can happen, I guess, with players of a certain age as well. But yes, I mean, Sterling's the one to get if you want to get a Chelsea goal. But it's 10 million, which is quite hard if you want to get if you De Bruyne, Salah, even. But I mean, all the sort of players that we're about to talk about, that Rich is going to talk about with the sort of captaincy and sort of premium asset options over the next 4 weeks. I mean, I think with James, he's once again there is choice here, and he is 6 million. But I think owners, he's a hold. If you had the choice to get another defender, it's possible I would look to save a bit of money and spend a bit more in midfield. Really, I think. I mean, I'm looking vaguely to go back to 5-man midfield after Gameweek 12 when I'm going to need a striker.
Are you?
Like, I haven't got. We can't mess around with your Archers and your Will Scarlett, whoever he is at Spurs, and all that lot. We can't mess around with these 4.5 people that don't exist.
Because 3 up top's the big thing at the moment, isn't it? Everybody's 3 up top. So are you thinking about ditching like Mitrovic, for example?
Yeah, well, I don't. I'm talking about after game week 12 because because I'm definitely going to be benching Haaland. I'm not going to think, you know what, I'm going to just get rid of Haaland for a week because he's gone up in price and he's just an absolute must-have. So I don't want to be playing with one striker, maybe, but one of Tony. I've got Tony and Mitrovic. One of them will have to go after game week 12, I think, because there's so many midfielders I want.
Okay. And last bit on it, Rich. James, I'm coming back. I started with James with you. I'm going to finish with James. So, for instance, for me, I already had it pegged in Perisic to James. There's no other real defenders I want. That's the other thing. There's no other ones that I look at and think there's high upside anymore. Like, even the Liverpool fullbacks, like, you know, Robertson's out. Trent, yes, he scored tonight, but obviously they're conceding loads and he's getting a lot of criticism at the moment. There's no other ones I'm looking at and thinking they have that big upside, apart from maybe Trippier, who obviously most people have anyway. So is that another thing, that there's just not those other options?
I think partly. I mean, I think in your situation, I mean, going to James would be the obvious move if you don't need the money.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I mean, I know I've mentioned quite boring defenders quite a few times now, like Fofana, no offense to Dunk, players like that, because there's just not really like many options unless you're paying a lot of money, like with James Cancelo, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, just in my team, I haven't got Trent or Cancelo. It's not always fun to watch. But yeah, I've kind of gone off big at the back a little bit. But James seems to be the one, for me, he's a standout. I know Cancelo is going to get a lot more clean sheets, I'd imagine. But he's also more money.
Yeah.
I feel like I'd want to go for James. But I mean, if someone didn't, like you, I wouldn't knock it. I wouldn't say he's essential. I just feel a lot better. I'll sleep better at night owning James.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's have a look at your captaincy matrix now, because I don't think James is on here, but it would be good to have a look at. So your captaincy matrix. So we asked you before you came on what you would like to talk about, and you said, obviously everybody's talking about the fact that captaincy's dead. It's all about Haaland. So you've given us a bit of a kind of captaincy decisions table here, haven't you?
Yeah, and I'd like to thank Joe actually for putting this together. I won't take the credit for it, but thank you, Joe. But yeah, a big reason I wanted to discuss this is because, you know, people have been mentioning, and for good reason, that Haaland's a perma captain. And a lot of the reasons behind my wild card has been because I've been trying to make sure I have what I think is the best captain, you know, for each game week when we're not going to be captaining Haaland.
Yeah.
Feel like this game week may have reduced, you know, people may well just captain Haaland every week, including, you know, the Liverpool away fixture, but they're going to have to look for another captain in game week 12. So 11 and 12, I feel like are the really, really interesting talking points, because game week 11, we've obviously got Tottenham at home to Everton. Now, obviously, Everton haven't been conceding many goals. I know it's not underlying stats, but I saw a tweet the other day saying they're the best defence in the league. I think that's purely on goals conceded.
Yes.
It is, yeah.
So, I mean, there is that. That could put some people off. But a big reason I went for Threemium is because in game week 11, I wanted to captain Kane. And I wanted to captain Kane ahead of, say, Son or Perisic. He's just risky, isn't he? In all ways, he's risky. So I feel like game week 11, that's going to be, I mean, I think a lot of people will just captain Haaland away to Liverpool, especially after what Brighton just did at Anfield. So I guess that's the first talking point. I mean, what are you two thinking with that game week 11 captaincy?
Well, I mean, I kindly put in Kane versus Everton as the best captain, but but the best alternative one for me is Haaland, because I don't really think of it's form over fixture, isn't it? Haaland's a beast. And I mentioned it a bit on the captaincy video. A few Manchester United fans were wondering if perhaps Manchester City might have a tougher game. And I know that Haaland has family, has history against Manchester United. But nevertheless, that was it was quite some showing, not just with goals, but getting assists as well, or rather getting assist points there. So I can't see, while Haaland is available, why I would take the armband off him. And if Liverpool Liverpool tonight have they're fielding four attackers in the Champions League, and so they're just basically saying, right, okay, we are going to concede. We're just going to try and score loads. Haaland had the chances in the Community Shield against Liverpool, but it was the rest of his team hadn't really sort of sussed him out, and I think they have now. I mean, some of the assists, some of the passing from De Bruyne is aimed at this area near the goal, but Haaland seems to leap through the air and karate kicks the ball into. I've seen this goal about 2 or 3 times now, and I think, well, they can't really. Well, they could. Teams could defend, but I can't see Alexander-Arnold. There was that goal in the Champions League. It was against Napoli where he just stood there and watched it. I mean, that's what I would do, because obviously I would be saying, "What am I doing here? I'm a 50-year-old man on a football pitch," and I would just stare at the strikers scoring, and I could just see that happening again. So, for me, also, yes, Everton. We laugh at their defense. Their expected goals conceded is still high, and they're not actually conceding that many. But Pickford is also back now, and that's what it's all about for me with the captaincy. Will Kane score against Everton? Probably. Will he score a hatful? Maybe. But will Haaland score loads against Liverpool when Brighton's sub winger just humiliated one of their best defenders? Well, I say that term loosely with Alexander-Arnold. So yeah, anyway, that sounded like a bit of a rant, didn't it? But yeah,
it's fine. It's fine.
Haaland against Liverpool. I'm not really that angry about it.
I think the big thing with me as well is, like, when you've got a player that is just dominating the league like he is, you do still have to look for opportunities to go against him, don't you? Like I did it last week, the week before last week, where I went with Kane against Leicester instead of Haaland, and it came out okay. But I'm looking at these fixtures, and I just see him scoring loads of goals in all of these fixtures, and it's so hard to go against that.
And Rich's highlight to highlight Kane, or it could indeed be Son against Everton, because we're not getting, unless Haaland's going to get that mega haul every week, which he may well do, but we're not going to get a huge amount of rank swing with just him. But we need these other players to really perform. So if some people are saying the captaincy is dead, we do, Kane against Everton, say he gets a brace for that, brilliant. He's not going to be as highly owned, and he's going to be a big green arrow, and that's the players you want, and that's the benefit of these. So, people just saying Haaland, but you've got to get these other players in. You've got to have them in your team as well to get that green arrow. So I do think Kane against Everton's a strong option, but I'm dazzled by Haaland.
So, yeah, I think what I find difficult with, and I guess I'll stick up for Kane a little bit here, I find it hard to, I mean, I know Liverpool have been bad defensively, but when you're comparing like Van Dijk to Connor Cody, you're comparing Alisson to Pickford, and even the managers, like you're comparing Klopp to, and I know you're not doing this, but you've got Klopp at one end and you've got Frank Lampard at the other end. And Kane, I mean, he's the second highest scorer in the league. He's been doing well. If Haaland didn't exist, and obviously he does exist, I think Kane would be getting a lot more hype. Yeah. But then it worries me the way, Andy, you've actually got Kane as well, and it sounds like you're wavering on it.
I want to look for opportunities where I can go against Haaland, because I think that is the way to really climb. If you really wanted to, like, don't get me wrong, if it goes wrong, obviously you fall. But if you want to go against everybody else and try and go up, I think 1 or 2 times before the World Cup you could do it. But you look at that, there's only really 2 opportunities, and it's 11 and 12, because you're not going to go against Haaland in 13, 14, 15, 16, I don't think, based on the fact he's playing Brighton, Leicester, Fulham and Brentford. So I think it makes a lot of sense to captain him in those. But in 12, obviously we get the blanks, so that's quite nice. And then in 11, is that maybe one of your last opportunities to go against him? And I think it probably could be. So yeah, it's going to be tough, because I mean, watching that game against United, he just does things that you don't expect him to do. Like the De Bruyne ball around the defence that he somehow got to. He does things you don't expect. So yeah, I think he could demolish Liverpool personally. But could Kane score more? I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I mean, looking at it, Rich, would you go for Kane instead in 11?
At the moment, I would, but obviously I own him. So I thought this is why this was quite an interesting topic, because I guess if people don't own Kane, they probably need to make the decision quite soon if they're going to, bring Kane in, like people did for Salah this week, and you know what happened there.
Yeah.
That decision needs to be made, pretty quickly. And I mean, also just having a plan for it. I mean, what if this week Haaland gets, injured against Southampton or in the Champions League, for example, and Kane scores, 6 goals? Obviously, both extreme scenarios. Then the whole narrative would change. So, and yeah,
there is also the whole thing about just owning Kane is enough. He's still only 20% owned, and you just think, like, this is horrible to say it, but Haaland, he's getting, he's 160% EO every week. It's just ridiculous what he's going to be owned by. And owning Kane and captaining Haaland means that you're gaining all of Kane's points, all of Haaland's points. It's a horrible way of looking at it, but there's some merit in it.
It's very similar to this week, though, wasn't it? With Maddison. So Maddison was a name that was my vice captain and was definitely in the frame. And I was talking about actually captaining Maddison, but I did look at the effective ownership, and I thought, well, I think they're both going to do well. I'm effectively betting almost an entire player that I own. And I'm willing him to get injured in the first minute, which is a terrible situation to be in. I mean a minor injury, that is, or maybe red carded. Let's say red carded. And at the same time, I just thought, well, just owning Maddison, because his ownership's not. I mean, on Twitter it may look like every single human being on the planet owns him, but he's only, what's his ownership? 10%, if that.
Yeah, 10%, I think. Yeah.
So 9 out of 10 managers don't have him. So just owning him is great.
Yeah, no, I do agree.
Same with Kane, I think. I mean, was he 20%, 25%?
Yeah,
that's great.
I mean, I guess part of my wild card, and I don't know if this was part of the reason you did it as well, Andy, was I planned like a captain matrix, and I wanted to captain Kane that game week. So obviously, I guess there is still that stubbornness that I don't have to go through with it. But I think I would. And part of the reason, and it saved me, part of the reason I was happy captaining Haaland this week was because I knew there was a couple of weeks coming up where I could go against it. Because that's the biggest Haaland haul I've had. I mean, obviously it's the biggest Haaland haul anyone's had, but prior to this, I've been captaining Salah a lot, and it's obviously not been doing me very well. Andy, that Wolves game where you captained Kane and Haaland scored, and then there was a red card. You seemed quite stressed that afternoon. It takes just a toll not captaining them.
Yes, it does. It's nice when Haaland plays first, though. that makes you feel a little bit better. Exactly. Yeah.
The one that's easy to go against is game week 12 because Haaland blanks. Unless someone's nervous they're going to change the fixtures or something, and they just captain him anyway and have a safe vice captain.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting one, though, because we haven't spoken about game week 12. And Joe, we've said about Salah against West Ham. West Ham are good defensively. They've got some really good defensive numbers. Salah has not been on it in terms of, yes, they're scoring goals, like Rich said earlier, but he hasn't been the Salah from last year. 100% hasn't been that Salah. Trossard against Forest. You mentioned it already.
Yeah.
That's not a bad shout.
I think there are options that week because there's no Haaland, so it's a free for all. Salah will be the most captains because he's still well owned, and people, he's Salah against West Ham, but he does have a good record against West Ham as well. But I think the combination of the new management at Brighton, Trossard being in form, World Cup place he's playing for. He wants to get in that Belgian 11, wants to cement a place there. And he's against a terrible attack, a terrible defence rather in Forest, who are away. So he's at home to a terror. I think he's got the best fixture, and he won't be highly owned, and he certainly won't be highly captained. I think this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for a player like that. I don't necessarily say Trossard as in, I mean, for me, that's just a perfect captaincy as a Brighton fan as well. It's that opportunity to back your own team player for a good fixture. But other people should look at other options that week as well, and just to see what's happening, because it is a blank for Manchester City and Arsenal. So we haven't got Haaland, we haven't got the likes of Jesus. So Kane against Manchester United, that could be an option. Everyone's banging on about Salah over the last few years, but Firmino very quietly has been very excellent recently, and so he could be an option. Mitrovic, if he's well, is again. I think Rich might be quite keen on this one. Mitrovic against Villa, perhaps.
See, that's again why 12 is interesting, because I think he would have been very, very popular in 12 at home to Villa. And I think that would have been maybe one people default to if they didn't want to go for Salah. So, like you say, it's opened the door for someone like Trossard.
Yeah.
I guess the interesting thing with Trossard is, like I mentioned earlier, because I'm looking at your team, I think it's quite hard for you to get. Well, it's easy technically to get to Trossard. It's quite easy.
My team, or
because you've got some, you've got good mid-price players already.
My team's too good, isn't it? Can't say it. Say it.
Don't say it.
Don't say it. Don't say it. I've got Pereira. Pereira is. I'm looking to get. So I can get 5 in midfield. So this is why I've got to be careful, because I would want to get 11 out in Game Week 12. I prefer not to take a hit. I've got Martinelli, Cancelo, Haaland, and De Bruyne, who all blank. So my other players have to play. So Patterson can't be done with. I need to replace him. I want to keep Haaland and De Bruyne. Ultimately, I want to have, this is my dream, I want to have Trossard Game Week 12 for the captaincy. And from Game Week 13 onwards, I want to have retained KDB and Haaland and get in Foden as well. So another midfielder, when that may be at the expense of Trossard, who then faces Manchester City. So I'm looking at Trossard as my top target ahead of Game Week 12 at some point. And then Game Week 13 onwards, if I can, I want to get those 3. So Cancelo's the one that's going to make way for me. I'm happy to ditch him. He's not showing up in any of these attacking defenders tables that we've shown over the course of the season. Yes, I know he can get good returns, and he has done. But I think I would prefer to have Foden, De Bruyne, and Haaland. I want a guy who's scoring. I want the 2 guys assisting. I also want people like Foden in my team who are scoring and assisting. So, but as you said, how do I do that? It's going to be tricky, but it's possible, and I have to be careful. And when we come to our decisions next week, if Mitrovic is out for a week, I'm tempted to bench just to give myself 2 free transfers and a bit more flexibility to plan. Because I don't really want to get in another striker at this stage until I know I can get them with those targets in mind.
Yeah, I don't think that's a crazy idea anymore. Doing the Cancelo and to Foden, because I think Foden is now more nailed than he's ever been. He's kind of got that right wing spot done, hasn't he? And Cancelo, with Haaland being there and people supplying him, he's always been a bonus point magnet, and obviously he's not getting those. They're not keeping as many clean sheets as we're expecting, and he's not as attacking as we think. So I think that move does make a lot more sense than it ever has. So I don't hate that at all. Rich, I'm just going to bring up your best. So this is a table of the best XGI for players. I mean, Haaland is ridiculously at the top, but it's just so we can talk about a few other kind of captaincy options moving forward, because we looked at Joe's tables just then, and there weren't a lot of options on there, were there? Because there's not a lot of players that you would say are captaincy options due to their ability to haul and things like that. But we've just got a list here of kind of the top players for XGI and who we're thinking about captaining in before the World Cup. Just talk us through the table a bit for those listening on the pod.
Yeah, so the table, it's sorted. So they've got to have had minimum of 5 shots on target and 3 starts in all matches as well.
The reason I did that is there was one of the Forest strikers was in there. But he had something like 2 shots on target all season. So I just thought, no one's going to captain him.
But yeah, was he above Haaland? So Haaland's clear top, like Andy mentioned. With 1.26 XGI per 90. Second place is actually Jesus, who, looking at live FPL, hurt my rank by more than anyone, more than Maddison, anyone like that. So he's highly owned, but maybe not so much, on Twitter or Scout, for example. So he's on 0.85. In third is KDB, 0.84. And then we've got Kane at 0.81. And then it's Bobby Firmino and Salah. So, yeah, Firmino seems like one I'm not going to risk. I wouldn't say he's going to cover Salah. But Salah and Kane, so even going back to the captaincy matrix, Salah and Kane are still, right up there.
Yeah.
So probably would be the best. If we exclude Haaland, they'd be the best captain options for 11 and 12, and potentially with Haaland they are as well.
Yeah, it's so interesting with obviously Jesus and Haaland being the top there, and people are obviously getting rid of them because the fixtures have changed a little bit and because they're blank. Should we be like Jesus in particular? Should we be jumping straight back onto him after the blank, Joe?
Yeah, I want to keep Martinelli.
Yeah.
Because they've got really good fixtures after the blank, starting with Southampton away, for Arsenal. So Gameweek 13, Southampton away. So I'm going to keep Martinelli, and yeah, I would like to get Jesus back. So I could see me getting him back at some point. I mean, it might not be; it might just be for the final game week. But at some point, yes, I would like to get him back. So he is a target. I mean, going back to the sort of, I mean, Haaland from 13 to 16, he is the main captain. You know, so he's against Brighton and then Leicester, then Fulham, then Brentford. Great fixtures. But as Rich was pointing out, Kane and Salah are in the mix. Even if you don't captain them, is worth owning, because Kane in 13 faces Newcastle, Salah against Leeds in 14, Kane against Liverpool. So that's quite interesting. The Liverpool and Spurs matchup in 15, and then game week 16, Salah's got Southampton. So they're still in the mix. So if you were to have Salah, I mean, Salah's not a sell. He's a very captainable asset for these fixtures. It's just Haaland's much better, and can you use that money elsewhere? And the way the pricing's going, KDB's heading up, sort of catching up Salah for price. I think he's 12.4 now, and Salah's 12.8. I mean, there's not much between them now, and the market is reflecting that KDB is a very good asset, and Salah's perhaps not the 13 million asset there. But yeah, Rich is right though. They're both good assets, and we have to bear in mind, what if Haaland gets an injury? What if he's out?
And talking about Haaland as well, Rich, like we're talking about the fact we're going to be captaining him in kind of 90% of fixtures moving forward, at least. Mm-hmm. But you look at De Bruyne and Foden. Foden is having a really good season. Obviously, he's just got a hat-trick against United as well. 4 million cheaper than De Bruyne. If you're not going to captain De Bruyne, do you just save that money and go for Foden?
I would. I definitely. I mean, Foden's one I really, really want, especially because KDB doesn't have penalties. A lot of the players on this list do have penalties. So yeah, I would. I mean, Foden's someone I really want. I even considered this week doing Saka to Foden, for example, but it's just this blank is making things very, very tricky. So I think he's going to be really, really popular. Like Joe said, after the blank, I think people are going to pile into Foden. Obviously, a lot of people are risking it already. Because I guess if you're putting up hauls like that, if you have to do a -4 to remove him after the blank, is it just worth just doing it? But then can you rely on hauls like that every week? I mean, it's really interesting, this table. I mean, Zaha really stands out with those fixtures, not as a captain, but as someone just to own, and you just leave him there.
I mean, those fixtures are lovely for Zaha. And he's another one where you're just going to be happy owning him. You're just going to be happy having, next week, if all goes well, I'm going to have Zaha, Maddison and Bowen all in my team. And it just feels lovely having those three, because they just seem so high upside.
As a podcast fan, and so I just for the benefit of those listening to the podcast version, those fixtures you were talking about there is the next 4 for Zaha: Leeds, Leicester, Wolves and Everton. Absolutely brilliant.
Really is. It's really nice. It's really lovely fixtures, and like Rich has alluded to already, penalty taker as well. It just makes sense to go with someone like him if you can get him in. But we're already talking about Foden as well, which just in a vacuum. I say in a vacuum, that's a silly thing to say, but with the blank coming up, Rich, does Foden against Southampton and Liverpool sound better than Zaha's Leeds, Leicester, Wolves? He's got an extra fixture, but it's City, and they're playing Southampton and Liverpool, who are leaky.
It kind of does. But I'm quite boring. So I do like players who have penalties. I favour going for players who have penalties, and that's probably why with the captaincy I like the Kane and Salah idea. But it is very tempting, to be honest. I mean, he's played pretty much every game, hasn't he? I think he might have played every game. So maybe we can't use rotation as a reason not to. Yeah, it is tempting. But I think there's something nice about Zaha. You just get him in, you leave him there. You don't have to think about captaining him. I mean, if someone, again, to mention being on wildcard, if someone was on wildcard this week, he'd be right up there as one you'd just put straight in without thinking about it. People like us who just wildcarded, we had a bit more of a decision, didn't we? Because there was a couple of trickier fixtures. Well, there was a blank and then the Chelsea fixture. but I think he kind of picks himself a bit like Maddison did for people who wildcarded last week, with that amazing initial fixture.
Yeah.
I think it would be a bit of a no-brainer to go for Zaha. But I think people are going to struggle to get to him because all the players have performed so well at the same kind of price point.
Not true.
No? Who's not?
No. I went with Ward-Prowse.
Oh, Ward-Prowse, yeah.
It's precisely because I wanted him to be poorly, so I could just go straight to Zaha.
He's the kind of player I like because you never feel bad selling him. And again, some penalties, he's nailed. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's where a lot of people in, say, Game Week 8, Game Week 9 wildcard differences, a lot like me had got Zaha in and benched him, but a lot might not have done on Game Week 9 because you can immediately see the fixture, even though playing against Chelsea is much better than not playing anyone. There's sort of a mental block of like, oh, he's got a bad fixture that week, and it does put some people off. But I hope people did get Zaha in if they played their wildcard Game Week 9, because I think he's an absolutely. I mean, the fixtures look good. He could let us down, but we can't beat ourselves up about that. He's got those great fixtures. But yeah, I definitely want Trossard, Tottenham, Brentford, Forest, and then City. So City's the one where I would. Yeah, I mean, Trossard's sort of my top target at the moment.
I like it. Right, let's move on to another section then. This is my section now, looking at it's kind of doing a bit of a deep dive on all the teams here. So looking at the top 10 teams for their XG so far this year, and also their XG conceded as well. So it's just kind of looking at them, looking at their next four, talking about the teams, talking about kind of what we like about them, whether we're even thinking about options from them as well. And then the next screen will be looking at the next 10 teams, because obviously their XG conceded gets a little bit worse as we go on. And it's just looking at kind of patterns and things like that. Obviously, Man City are clear at the top here, 18.29 for XG, expected goals so far this year. Then it's Arsenal. Then, surprisingly, it's Newcastle. Newcastle in third there, 14.55 for their expected goals so far this year. And then it's Spurs, then Liverpool, then Brighton. There they are again. Brighton are having such a good year so far this season, aren't they? Brentford are next. Could be slightly skewed there, Brentford, with the United result, unfortunately. Then Man United, Leeds, and Everton. It really does surprise me, Everton. They always seem to be creeping into these tables, don't they? Like, their underlines aren't amazing, but they always seem to be creeping in. Joe, I'm going to start with you. Is there anything from this table? Obviously, we've got the next four fixtures for everybody on here as well. We've highlighted Man City, Spurs, and Liverpool there. But are there anything here that surprises you or kind of stands out for you as you look at the table?
This table and the next one, they were both sorted by expected goals. So these are the top 10 for expected goals, and then next to the best 10 or the worst 10, however you want to look at that. So the XG conceded is quite telling, because it proves where you want to invest in, whether are they more of a defensive side or are they more of an attacking side. So we can see, for example, Manchester City at the top. So let's use them as the benchmark of excellence. Expected goals over the season, just over 18. Expected goals conceded, that's the best as well, just over 5. And they do have a blank, but then they got Southampton, Liverpool, Brighton. So they are an absolute team to keep hold of, to not jettison too much. And I'm already thinking about getting Cancelo, because that expected goals is so huge. But thinking about it now, just while we've been chatting, really, Cancelo to Foden might be one of those luxury vanity moves that I just don't get to do. And it may be that I do other things. And will there be such a massive points difference between Cancelo and his clean sheets and maybe attacking returns, and Foden's obvious attacking returns as well? And that's what I've got to weigh up, really. And it may be that I'm getting rid of one good player for another good player. But triple City, I think, has to be the key, I think, going forward. If you're not on it already. Arsenal, yeah, great. We will get rid of Arsenal in our Game Week 8 and 9 wildcards, but it's the Game Week 13 wildcarders for the patient players. Game Week 13, load up on City and Arsenal and just go on holiday. Just leave your team. Yeah. Captain Haaland, vice captain Jesus, leave your team and then go on holiday, come back and find yourself in the top 10 of the game. Newcastle and Brighton, obviously their attack are well worth investing in. Newcastle, so Callum Wilson, if he can stay fit, I think he's a great option. and Brighton, we've spoken about at length. About Everton, you can see their attack is awful in terms of expected goals. They're the 10th best, but in comparison to the other teams that we're mentioning, including Brighton and Newcastle there. But it's expected goals conceded. Expected to conceded 13, which is one of the worst. Yet they're not conceding the worst. So something's going on there, and it could be we're witnessing Burnley version 2, and it is Pickford is just picking, he's just saving really easy shots. Maybe he's just he's conceding loads of goals. The expected stats lunatics think it's going to go in, but perhaps they're not. Yeah. So I think Everton are really interesting, and Seb is not here, and I'm sure he would mention Leeds. I don't know what to make of Leeds at the moment, and I'm sure he would help us.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, a lot of us had Rodrigo in our teams not too long ago, didn't we? And we kind of now own no Leeds.
Yeah, we'll be put off, but maybe we're sleeping on some of their assets. I don't know.
I mean, Rich, you're looking here. You must be thrilled with triple Newcastle defence, with them being the third best in terms of XG conceded this year. Is that something you just going to hold them up until the World Cup?
I don't know. It was more because I was forced to wildcard a couple of weeks ago, and they had that game. They were home to Bournemouth, weren't they? And they were very unlucky that the Billing scored. And I mean, again, in the last game, I mean, I guess they were fortunate they were playing against the team with 10 men, and you know their best player had gone off injured. But still, again, quite unlucky. So, I mean, looking at this, it makes me a bit sad because basically I moved from Brighton defenders, and then I started paying more for Newcastle. But obviously, because of fixtures and all of that stuff, I had to do it. So it's not a long-term plan, but I kind of like them a bit. Like I like Brighton defenders. Like I'm happy to hold them. Like I'm not like overly excited about them, but what really stands out in this table for me is Arsenal. Like by far, I mean, the defensive data as well. I mean, I've still got Saka and Martinelli. We mentioned in the last segment about Jesus. I want him back. I kind of miss not owning a defender because looking at, the upcoming fixtures after the blank. I mean, I was on Gabriel. I was more than happy with him. I know people like yourself, Andy, were on Saliba and got quite lucky. But I could see myself wanting like 4 or 5 of their players after the blank game week.
Yeah.
And even at the moment with the Liverpool game, I kind of don't want to sell what I have.
Yeah. And they're cheap as well. They're not expensive. Like you're looking at Arsenal, like Liverpool, and Chelsea, you're looking at them and thinking it's a bit of a gamble because they're expensive. You look at Sterling and players, and their defenders. Arsenal, they're all so cheap. Jesus is still only 8 million to get in.
But we seem to always, as FPL managers, target, if the player's more expensive, they're more like shiny and they're harder to get. Whereas getting someone like Saka, it's quite easy, so it doesn't seem as glamorous. But
maybe we should keep in game week 12. Maybe we should just go in with 10 players or something. Just keep all these players.
It's too late for me now. I've got rid of them all. I've only got one Man City.
I know, that's why I can't get rid of Martinelli. And Jesus obviously is hurting us. And maybe I should be prioritizing Jesus over Foden, for example.
But then I kept Saka. I could have gone for Maddison, but I thought I'll keep Saka. You can get punished like in one game week.
Yeah.
Just like
that's obviously worst case scenario.
Just like we could potentially get punished ignoring Foden because of the blank.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we were just saying, isn't it? But then Zaha looks good as well. So there is a decision to be made there. Maybe it's a good thing they've obviously got that blank because we're not just jumping on all of us jumping on Man City. We've got some decisions to make, which is quite nice.
I mean, overall with this particular segment of this table, the top 10 here, these are the attacks we want to be targeting. With Everton, a bit of a caveat there, and as I said, Leeds, I don't know, but it's those attacks we do not want to be ignoring them. And I know they have a blank, but game week 13, that's when we want to be getting them. And perhaps we should be even considering keeping them now. I'm certainly gonna have a bench of 3, at least 3. I don't know. I'm tempted to just keep it. Maybe I should just keep them all. But yeah, you're right. City and Arsenal is their defense as well. They've got points at both ends there. So that's what we want. That's the holy grail, really.
Yeah. And the next slide is the next 10 teams. So this is based on their XG expected goals again. So it's at the top is Leicester with 9.16. Then Chelsea. So Chelsea in 12th in terms of their expected goals this year so far. Then Fulham. Then Nottingham Forest. Well done, Andy. Then West Ham, then Southampton. Villa, Wolves. Wolves are at 7.61 for a team that can't attack at all. They are still comfortably double the worst team in the league this season. Then it's Crystal Palace and then Bournemouth at the bottom. Worth mentioning as well, the XG conceded does not correspond to their XG expected goals at all. Whereas in the top 10, it was you could see a kind of correlation, whereas at the bottom, you really can't. So Leicester are obviously 11th, but their XG conceded is 14.06, comfortably the third worst, I think it is. Nottingham Forest are the worst on here, which we're not that surprised about. But then Bournemouth are also, fairly awful. But Crystal Palace, I was really surprised at as well.
I think the thing with Leicester as well, for their expected goals as well, so they're below Everton, but you would look at them now and you would think, no way is their attack worse than Everton. But it's mainly Maddison is getting those returns.
And low XG as well.
He's massively overperforming. And I don't mean that in a kind of one day he's going to stop. Some players just do that. And he's got amazing free kicks like Ward-Prowse, but Leicester are earning more than Southampton. So that's why there's that sort of anomaly in the figures there. But so people shouldn't look at that and think, oh, Leicester's attack is really bad, it's worse than Everton's, so let's not get Maddison. Get Maddison in because he's overperforming and long may it continue. But their expected goals conceded, well, I don't know. Is that Ward? I mean, finally he's getting the clean sheet. But I think Bournemouth are the most interesting because so many people last week were going mad for Solanke. It was becoming a joke. And I was looking at these types of figures and I was thinking, I mean, they're so far the worst attack that it's almost like they've given up now. That now they are just simply a bus team.
We did talk about this last week, though, didn't we?
Parking the bus,
said that Scott Parker was there. Fixtures were difficult. I mean, I went to go and watch the game. I went to go and watch Bournemouth versus Brentford, and it was awful.
Yeah,
the quality was so bad. It was the only nil-nil.
We don't want that.
There was
We
no
don't want
chances.
that. We don't want that filth in our teams, do we?
Dear. But the only thing I will say is, I said this last week, I still don't think Solanke's a bad pick moving forward because he's got the minutes, he's got the penalties, and they're under a different manager. Although they won't have a new manager until the takeover's completely done.
Compared to for that, even though he's cheap, compared to some of these other assets, there in terms of attack. So a Newcastle strikers, for example, and obviously Mitrovic as well. They're just a little bit more, but they're offering so much more. Than Bournemouth are.
What do you think about this table, Rich? Anything stand out for you?
The Bournemouth one, I mean, like you say, that last game was bad. I thought they were going to turn it around. It looked like when the fixtures are turning. I think if I wildcarded last week, I'd have gone for Solanke. Now that we potentially might be looking at Mitrovic replacements, I say potentially, I've not seen any news to suggest he will start or that he's definitely out. I think I'd be a little colder on going to Solanke. I feel like I just want to see. I know the fixtures are good now. They've got. They got Leicester next. Leicester, Fulham, Southampton, West Ham. So it's a very short span when they're very, very good. I'd almost just want to see a game or two more. I'd happily hold Mitrovic, for example, and just see how it goes with Solanke. But there's not many strikers. It's funny. It seems to have changed. There was a lot of strikers I wanted a few weeks ago. I mean, I started the season. My budget striker was Bamford. He was my cheapest striker. I've had 3 up front all season. But it seems like a lot of Tony's his best fixture's just gone. In that game you mentioned the awful fixture. I'm kind of going a bit colder on the strikers.
I think I would only be getting Solanke now, and we mentioned this last week, if I could bench him. If I had a better option midfield.
I'd only get him if I could never ever play him.
Yeah, well, he's got Leicester,
Sounds
and he's
brilliant.
got Fulham away, and then he's got Southampton, and then he's got West Ham away. I'd only want to play him in those home fixtures, so I'd want to probably play him and have somebody that could, because I mean, game week 12, you could play him against Southampton, couldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, Joe mentioned earlier, didn't he, about you vaguely touched on maybe having one striker, and something I did last season was when I got Pookie, and I think Pookie and King, and I didn't really want to play either of them, but I was happy to. So I think I was playing 2 up front, and I just rotated those 2 because they were both under 6 million. We haven't really got that at the moment, unless there's a midfielder we could rotate them with, or a defender. But so maybe if you're not going for 3 up top, you could then look at them as, like you say, bench fodder. And then if he gets upgraded to being an every week starter, win-win.
Yeah, and I think Joe might be kind of ahead of the curve here a little bit, where he might be, you could have someone like Solanke if you can bench him, so you can get someone like Trossard into your midfield. I think that looks quite nice, actually. I think that might be a way forward. Right, let's move on to our community team. Poor old Seb obviously isn't here, and we haven't told Rich that he's going to be taking over the community team yet.
I saw that Seb captain Nick Pope the week before.
So as long as you don't do that every week, it's going to be an upgrade.
It's a low benchmark of success. So literally anything you do will be better.
Yes. So the community team did okay this week. I don't actually know the total they got. I think it was around 90 this week.
It was 92.
92. So we have Pope in goal, Trippier, James, Cancelo, Andreas Pereira, Martinelli, Maddison obviously with his 18, Zaha, De Bruyne with 8, Haaland with 46, and Mitrovic with 0. We did have Neco Williams on the bench for a -1, and we did also have Ward on the bench for an 8 as well. Not too bad, I think 92. Let us know in the chat if you beat 92 this week. We just need to talk about what we're going to do with this team moving forward, because obviously we have triple City, but we can't really get rid of them now against Southampton at home. I think it's just, we might have 2 free transfers actually, because we've got Isak still on the bench. So I'm assuming we've got 2 free transfers, and it's what we do with it. A lot hinges on Mitrovic, doesn't it? But we've got Isak and Mitrovic that could potentially be out. I think kind of we could be on the verge of using our 2 free transfers. What do you think, Joe?
Well, I like the look of Gahey on the Palace defenders on the bench. That's great. That's a Game Week 12 player already. They've got 4 Game Week 12 players here. So Martinelli, De Bruyne, Cancelo, Haaland. So the same as my ones. This could be an opportunity to go for to add an extra midfielder and replace Andreas. So I would look. I think. I mean, I'm biased with Trossard, but I think he is a great option. There, and I think he would be there. So he's already got Zaha and Maddison, Bowen possibly, but I do think Trossard is the one because he's a captaincy contender in 12. I personally will be minded, because you've got 2 free transfers. Isak and Andreas is switched to a 3-5-2. Trossard in midfield. Someone massively cheap, but will play in Game Week 12. So maybe, I don't know how much the Palace striker is. Edouard, is he 5 something?
Edouard. Oh, I don't know whether I could ever go with a Palace striker again.
Says the man who just bigged up Solanke as if he's like Pele.
That's what I'm going to say to get in this week. Get Solanke in for Isak.
Literally.
I mean, Rich, what would you do this week? Because this is the first time you're probably seeing this team properly. What do you reckon you would do?
Yeah, I've been proper staring at it. I mean, it's funny, we've just gone off a discussion about playing one up front, and then there's 2 strikers who may or may not be injured. It sounds like Isak might be back. He was training last week.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think this might be primed. Maybe this is the kind of team we've just discussed where you could maybe bring Solanke in.
Yeah.
Because there are bench options.
Yes.
I haven't had much time to think about it. You've got a problem where you can't take many players out, because like even Gahey, he's a brilliant option up until the World Cup.
Yeah.
All the defenders seem fine to me. You've got I wouldn't want to sell any of the midfielders apart from, like you mentioned, Andreas.
I'm also worried we're in a position where we've got 2 free transfers, but we've got 3 Man City plus an Arsenal one there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if we use 2 free transfers exactly to not get rid of any of them, I feel like we're going to be setting ourselves up for a bit of trouble in Game Week 12, where we're actually put in quite a good position at the moment.
That's why it's prime for Solanke, I think.
I think it is as well, because he's got a good fixture in 12. Ooh,
Deary me.
Joe.
Oh, I can't stomach that.
You wouldn't even have to start him.
Do we want to play Williams against the mighty Trossard in Game Week 12? So Williams out. I would be tempted to get Williams out for a playable cheap. I don't know how much is in the bank with this, but if there's anything, maybe even a second Palace defender or Brighton defender, depending on how much we've got, that will get a good player out in Game Week 12. And they're just going to stay on the bench anyway. But do we really want Neco Williams? I mean, he might actually not even start. Serge Aurier's playing.
I think for me, I just do. Oh, stop it! I think I just do Isak down to someone, Solanke or FPL Marshall saying, "What about Welbeck?" So you never know.
Yeah. And Daka, FPL Jones bloke says Daka, very intriguing.
Don't know.
That was one I was tipping last week.
You were. Yeah. Right, let's move on to some bus teams then. Seb, I think we'll have a little kind of liaise with Rich this week and talk about handing over the reins maybe for the community team. We'll see how that goes. Right, looking at my bus team then. So my bus team, I've got Pope in goal. I've got Zuma, Cancelo, Trippier. I've got Bowen, Martinelli, Ward-Prowse and Maddison. And then I've got Haaland captain, Kane and Mitrovic with Perisic, Andreas Pereira and Neco Williams on the bench. So Ward-Prowse to Zaha is 100% happening, as long as no injuries happen or anything like that. So that's going to be happening. So then I'll have Bowen, Maddison and Zaha in midfield, which is what I wanted. And then I've got another free transfer to use because I've got 2 free transfers because I rolled last week. Perisic to James was what was potentially going to happen. I think if Mitrovic is fit, I don't really need to do that because I'm going to have to be benching either Zuma against Fulham, which obviously if Mitrovic is playing is maybe a tougher fixture. Trippier against Brentford I think is quite nice anyway. So I'm going to actually be struggling to get James into the 11 and who to bench. So I think Ward-Prowse to Zaha is definitely happening. It's just whether I do Perisic to James or whether there's anything else I can do. But to be honest, I quite like the idea of rolling that extra transfer again potentially. It's just how much I fancy James against Wolves. And you think Wolves are not great attacking wise, but obviously they've just sacked Bruno Lage, haven't they? So yeah, that's my potential second move. I think if I don't fancy getting James, I don't think I'll make another move. I think I would then roll the second transfer to have 2 again next week. But yeah, I'm fairly happy with my team going into next week. It
seems like last week where you didn't need to bring James in. Yeah. And like you say, you're kind of in that situation again where you don't actually desperately need him. And then you've got Perisic next week against Everton, which is probably one of the best fixtures there is.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't feel like he's essential. I don't feel like he is. I think I've got some money in the bank as well because I needed to do the Zaha one. Yeah. So I've got, hang on. Yeah, I've got 1.6 in the bank. So I've got that to be able to do Ward-Prowse to Zaha and Perisic to James. And I think, and 2 transfers. So yeah, it's not looking too bad at the moment.
Zaha, Maddison, Bowen. Yep.
Yeah. But then last week I thought it was going to be a bad week and I hit over 100. This week, if it's looking good, it will be 30 odd. Joe, let's have a look at your best team. Talk us through it.
Okay. Yeah, I've got. I'm keeping it the same. I've got Pope and a 3-4-3. So Pope at the back, Cancelo, Trippier, and James. All at home. All at home. All good fixtures. Zaha, my vice captain against Leeds at home. De Bruyne at home as well. Maddison away to Bournemouth, Liverpool. I'm sorry, Martinelli at home to Liverpool. So loads of home players there. Haaland captain, obviously. Tony against Newcastle, which is annoying because I don't like attackers v defenders, but he could score. He could get a penalty. I would love it if he does after Trippier's gone off and then perhaps Pope saves it and then he scores the rebound in. Something like that would be amazing. I've got Mitrovic as well. I hope he plays. I don't have any West Ham defenders. If he's out, I don't think I'm minded. I've only got 1 free transfer. I'm minded just to, just move him on the bench and get maybe Andreas or Nico Williams if he can play against Villa. There's could be a clean sheet there. I don't know. This is why the bench players are for. So one of them's come in, but I'm not. There's no one I particularly want to get in for Mitrovic, and I would like to go into game week 11 with 2 free transfers, and then eventually game week 12 with 2 free transfers. So 1 transfer to use in game week 11, hopefully, and then game week 12 I can get my Trossard dream.
Yeah. Lovely start. I can't wait for you to get Trossard. I feel like it's been due. Yeah. It's
going to be amazing.
Rich, your first best team of the Scoutcast season. Talk us through it.
And it looks quite messy. So yeah.
It looked all right, actually.
I think the Patterson injury is what I don't like because he was quite pivotal for the blank and everything. I've only got 1 Man City player. So I've got Haaland captain. I've got triple Newcastle defence with Pope, Trippier and Botman. I might still play Bailey. It depends. I mean, if Mitrovic is injured, I might just play Bailey. Then I get the Monday night game against Nottingham Forest. Maybe he does what Maddison did. I doubt it though. My dilemma though is I look at my team and I quite like it. I've got Saka, Martinelli, and Salah in midfield. Yeah. Obviously, Saka and Martinelli, they're at home to Liverpool. After the discussion we've had today, I don't hate it. My original plan was Saka to Zaha. That's why I didn't do Saka to Maddison last week. I decided I'd save it and then I can get Zaha in. I'm now wondering, because of the Patterson injury, because I don't know what's going on with Mitrovic, maybe I'm better to roll it. Go without Zaha. Just for a week or two, and stick with what I got. Get 2 free transfers, and then I can properly think about what to do. Because it feels like at the moment I'm kind of just, I don't know. I don't have a clear plan. I've already planned for the blank, so I now need to think of a way of getting out of that blank, because I've got, like I mentioned, 1 Man City and 2 Arsenal. And they're all the attackers. I want the defenders in after 13.
Yeah. I swear, I don't think there's enough you can do. Like, I think Saka to Zaha is a good move, personally. But, I don't think there's enough you can do. I feel like you should be planning for future weeks. Like you said, like maybe use those 2 free transfers next week. But
yeah, it's not like a pressing need, is it? It's kind of one of those ones that might it might backfire. The only one I could really do is if Mitrovic was out and I wanted to get a bit more adventurous, I could do, Mitrovic down to a budget striker and then upgrade Bailey or Andreas to Zaha.
Yeah.
But it doesn't fully help for the blank, because then I've got a non-playing striker when I like I don't like the strikers as much as I did at the start of the season, but I'm going to be there with Kane and Haaland. Kane or Salah are eventually going to be my cash cow. So there is a way out of this. I haven't mentioned I've got the freemium, so I've got Kane, Haaland, and Salah. So it's kind of restrictive. The Newcastle clean sheet would be good.
It would, mate. Yeah, 18 points there and then. Lovely stuff. So some interesting decisions for all of us to make, anyway. So we're going to move on to our question section now. And to be honest, I liked it so much last week that we're going to do the same this week. So we're going to try and answer as many questions as possible because we've got a bit of time left. And it will be just answer the questions as quickly as you can. So whether that's one word or whether it's just one sentence, but as quickly as you can. So could you chuck in your questions for us, please? We'd love to have as many as possible. We've got over 500 people watching, which is awesome, on a Tuesday night when there's Champions League and Championship on tonight as well. So thank you very much for those people that have joined us. Make sure you do tune in to us again next week as well, because Rich, you're going to be on with us again next week, aren't you?
Yeah, no, I've had fun. I've seen all the messages in the chat, but I'm not very multi-skilled. I can't concentrate on more than one thing at once. I know some people are very good at replying to people.
Yes, we've seen a few people on there. I know Praz was in there, I saw, saying, well up the flapjack. So I think people are quite happy with you being on here. Right, here we go. Tony D says, do I triple captain Haaland against Southampton? Joe, what do you think?
No, save it for a double game week. Imagine Haaland playing twice in a week.
Yeah,
and then imagine him playing Southampton. But imagine him playing 2 other rubbish teams twice in a week. Or even anyone twice in a week.
Yeah. Rich?
Yeah, exactly that. I think I heard there is going to be a Man City double, so I'd wait.
Yeah. Michael Sosner says, how much do you guys use a Rate My Team? I once asked on a post and was basically trashed for even thinking about it. If you answer this question, and I've got a question for you as well. So, Rich, what do you think about Rate My Teams?
As in asking people to review that, as in posting your team and saying, what do you think of this out of 10? Kind of thing.
Think so. It's either that or like like they do on Scout, where it shows your projections and what your team's going to do. I'm guessing.
Yeah. So I think people are just going to give you their opinion on their team.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, does he mean just prediction models in general? Or...
Well, that's what I was going to ask. So obviously, there's been a big thing on Twitter today, hasn't there, about copying content creators, and if you're using a model, that's like cheating and doing all that kind of stuff. God, there's so many different debates about it at the moment, aren't there? But what's your kind of take on it all, Joe?
Well, that's all stemmed from Ross, FPL Raptor, who is a content creator. He's also appeared on Meet the Manager as well, written a very good book about psychology of FPL. He's doing really well, top 600, I think he is. And some bright-eyed people noticed that in his mini league, there's about 20 people copying him, and they've all got exactly the same score. And and it's really angered people because it's like people copying people's content and things, but you can't do all of that all season. And even if you can, where's the fun in that? So and people are comparing that to models as well. But the reality is, what with content creators and models, they're just one piece of the jigsaw that we all goes into our brains and we all think about for the game week. And that's the way to play the game, really. But predictive models, I like using them, but I don't swear by them. I don't think, oh, that one says that one, that like Sertap's optimal squads. I don't look at that and think, oh, I must get that player in. I just use that as a useful guide, and and it's the same with the rate my team one as well. So I like them as well. And but the going back to Ross's being getting to top 600, I sort of want him to get to number one, and 20 these other people like I don't know, like they're following the Messiah. So suddenly there's 20 people equal number one. They've all made exactly the same transfers. The team value's exactly the same. Maybe I don't know. How does it go? Alphabetical? I mean, what?
Just
how are they going to
decide? No, it would be user ID, won't it?
User ID.
Yeah.
Oh,
who's got
God.
the lowest ID? Yeah.
So what if Ross's user ID? There's people there that follow him.
Is higher than
before. He ends up like 30th, and I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it might be amusing if that did.
It's irrelevant anyway because one of us is winning, so it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine, isn't it? No one. And also,
thing really quickly.
Yeah, go on. Yeah, I was going to ask you.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in it, and especially I found last season when there was a lot of double game weeks, blanks, and things like that. I found it very useful because, for example, you might have a single game week player, and then for a good team, and a double game week player for a bad team. So it's just, I think it's a good, in that example, to get your head around, exactly, should you start Salah against this bad team, or should you start like Charlison against, who was playing for Everton at the time? I think things like that, it helps me compute, exactly what to do. So I think there's a lot of value in it.
Yeah, I think there always is, and it's looking at what's logical. Because sometimes our decisions aren't really logical, and then you look at some of the predictive models and you go, yeah, of course, Haaland's the best captain this week, and things like that. Why am I even bothering looking elsewhere? And it just helps.
Blake Young says Wilson or Welbeck for 11 and 12. Rich.
Wilson. He's on penalties.
Joe? Yeah.
That's tough, isn't it? They're both injury prone. So I'm going to say, I'm going to back Welbeck. Right, but to be honest, they're both good, and they're both also could be injured.
FPL Spartans, question for Andy: why wouldn't you keep James Ward-Prowse and bench him against City? Because his next two fixtures after that for Southampton are very good. Because he's not Zaha. That's why. And I fancy Zaha way more in the next 4 fixtures. And he doesn't play Man City, which helps. Dal says, help, is 105 points and a rank rise from 278k to 56k any good?
No, it's absolutely awful. And he posted that earlier, and it was pointed out in the chat. It was awful, and I hope he's taken that to heart, because it really is one of the worst things I've heard.
CJ says, do I do Salah or Kane through game week 11 and 12? What do you think, Rich? If you had to pick one,
I'd go Salah. Because it's because I feel like the game week 12 captaincy I'd prefer, and the fixtures after are good.
I'm genuinely shocked you said Salah. Joe, what do you think?
Between Kane and Salah?
Yeah,
Kane, I think. Yeah.
That's the opposite way round of what I thought you would answer.
No, because there's so many midfielders I want, and they're not Salah, and there's spaces. There's a space. If it's an ideal world, though, I don't think I can't get that. I can't get a Kane. I can't afford that. I'm too lowly.
David Jones says, who has an ID lower than 8,000? Joe, what's your ID?
No, it's more. No, hang on. No, it's more than that.
Is it?
Yeah.
So not high. No, what about you, Rich? He's looking it up.
Like 32,000.
Oh,
I remember I was in a 1-to-1 meeting when it launched.
Yeah, I'm in the fives as well. Do you know what? I was doing some content for fantasy football. Actually, I was doing something, changing something around, and then suddenly I saw something on our Slack that said, "Oh, it's launched." And then checked the time. It was like 20 minutes ago.
Yeah. I'm the only sad one then. 2,035 mine is.
Yeah, some of us will work.
Raptor, you might win the whole thing.
Yeah. Oh, good point. And here we go. Let's have one more. Ahmed Musa says, do I do Barnes to Zaha or do I do Tony to Wilson this week?
Barnes to Zaha.
Joe?
I don't know if I'd do either. But if you had to do one, Barnes to Zaha, but Tony to Will, Tony Wilson, the factory records impresario. So maybe I would never do that.
Yeah. Okay. Right, back to the home screen then. Joe, thank you very much for joining us again this evening. I hope you enjoyed your evening.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been excellent, and it's great to welcome Rich aboard the SS Scouts cast, and it's been good. It's been enjoyable. I hope you've had a good time, and many more to come.
Yeah, and Joe, is it true that you would only allow people on the Scoutcast if their overall rank was lower than yours?
Yeah, that's also
Yes.
the other reason he's there. So he's massively welcome. And once he surpasses me next week, he can go.
Yeah, he'll be gone. And Rich, hope you enjoyed your first time on the Scoutcast this year.
Yeah, no, I did. It was a lot of fun, and I only just made the cut. I think I was slightly ahead of Joe until the final Maddison assist right at the end. So yeah, so it was close. It almost wasn't me that got to be chosen.
No wonder we were cheering on Maddison so much then. Lovely stuff. Everybody that's in the chat, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And if you're listening on the pod as well, thank you so much for listening. We do appreciate it. And Seb has been in the chat as well, wishing us all the best and cheering on Rich as well. So we will see you again next week. We hope your arrows are green going into next week. Only a few left until the dreaded blank, and a few more until the World Cup. We'll be with you all the way. Right. See you later, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.